So for nominations, any member of the board is granted the right to nominate a candidate for the position. You've got 3 positions tonight: board president, board vice president, and board secretary treasurer. That's one role. Nominations will be taken for one position at a time unless the board votes to accept a slate of nominations for all 3 positions. The nomination process will be initiated by the board president calling for the nominations for each office, which per my recommendation would be subsequently seconded by another board member. And then after completion of accepting nominations, the board president will actually declare that nominations are closed. One thing that I would suggest to change for this is that you can have a nomination and a vote, and then for each office, and then move to the next office, have a nomination and a vote. So that way, different people can be, the same person could be nominated for multiple offices. If they haven't been elected to that first office. So, the voting method, I'll go over that. Because of the Texas Open Meetings Act, your voting method shall be either a hand raised vote or roll call vote. We're not allowed to do ballot voting for transparency purposes. The board, inclusive of the president, consists of 10 directors. And so according to Chapter 36 of the Water Code, in order for you to have a passing action or someone to be elected, you have to have a concurrence of a majority. So that means you have to have 6 votes for that office candidate. And so the president, let's say there's not a president nominated tonight, whoever the acting vice president will continue in that, will be the president. A president. Not saying that that might happen, but that's just kind of part of the process. So a director can make a motion to approve this voting method and the nomination method. The second, and we vote on it. And then our next item is actually opening nominations.
When you say you must have a majority, is that a seated majority?
It's a majority of, well, it's not president voting, it's a majority of the seats. So you got 10. Yes, that's correct. I did check on that. Director Samay asked me to look at that.
Okay, any questions on the process? Would anyone like to amend or change the process? Okay. I entertain a motion then. This is for the process. If everyone's okay with the process. Okay. I'll entertain a motion for the process.
I move we approve the process for electing board members.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve or accept the process, a proposal that was presented to us. A second?
Second.
Okay, so the motion was seconded by Director Cole. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion then passes unanimously. Okay, we will move on then to the actual elections themselves now.
Correct.
That's item 1F in the agenda. So pursuant to Board Rule 21A, the board will conduct its annual election for president, vice president, and secretary treasurer for board action. So with that, I will open nominations up for president.
I would like to nominate Elvis for president.
Okay, here a nomination for myself for president.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Director Rogers. Any other nominations for president? Okay, then nominations are closed. I guess we'll take a roll call vote for the nomination for Director Hernandez, for me, for President. So Dr. Arsufi, Tom?
Yes.
Director Cole? Director Texter?
Yes.
Director Rogers? I will vote yes. Director Burgess Phillips? Phillips Burgess, sorry, I'll get it right. Sorry, my bad. Director Smith?
Yes.
Director Cook?
Yes.
Director Phillips?
Yes.
And Director Smith?
Yes.
Yes. All right, so that then passes unanimously. We will then move on to Vice President. Nominations for Vice President. I'll open up nominations for VP.
I nominate Cheryl Smith for Vice President.
I decline. I don't wish to seek any office this year. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Nominate David Rogers.
Okay, there's a nomination for Director Rogers. Are there any other nominations for Vice President?
We need a second.
Oh, sorry, thank you, a second, thank you. See, that's why I just sit next to me. All right, seconded by Director Cole. So then we will have, I guess, a roll call vote again.
Are there any other nominations?
Oh, any other nominations? Okay, with that, nominations are closed for Vice President, and we'll have a roll call vote. Director Arsufi?
Yes.
Director Cole?
Yes.
Director Texter?
Yes.
Director Rogers?
Yes.
I will vote yes. Director, oh, I got it. Phillips Burgess. I've got it written down. Director, that was a yes for Director Phillips Burgess. Director Smith?
Yes.
Director Cook? Director Phillips?
Yes.
And Director Seman?
Yes.
Okay, so that passes unanimously. So now we'll have nominations for Secretary Treasurer. I'll open up nominations for Secretary Treasurer.
I'll nominate Mike Smith.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, I heard a second from Mr. Cook, Director Cook. That's what I
I
heard.
believe Director Arsufi came in first.
Okay, all right, then Director Arsufi. I knew there was like, I heard it from both sides. Director Arsufi then seconded. So any other nominations for Secretary Treasurer? Seeing none, nominations are closed. We'll have the roll call vote for Secretary Treasurer. Director Arsufi.
Yes.
Director Cole.
Yes.
Director Texter.
Yes.
Director Rogers.
Yes.
I will vote yes. Director Phillips Burgess.
Yes.
Director Smith.
Yes.
Director Cook.
Yes.
Director Phillips.
Yes.
And Director Seman.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Okay, we will now move on to agenda item number 2, public comments. Those desiring to speak during public comments, please complete a speaker form and present it to the district secretary before the meeting. Speakers will have 3 minutes each to speak. This time cannot be transferred or shared. Board directors will not ask questions of the speakers or take action during this item. Regarding any item not on the agenda, any responses from board directors will be limited to factual statements, recitation of existing policy, or a request for the topic to be placed on the future agenda per the Texas Government Code 551.042. All right, so 2A, non-agenda items, I have Mrs. McKee.
Yes.
For the record, my name is Nancy McKee. I'm a resident of Lee County, and I have an exempt well in Carrizo Officer.
Ms. McKee, I think the microphone may not be on.
And
Yeah, 'cause there's 2 buttons. I think.
There we go.
There you go. Thank you.
Now, for the record, my name is Nancy McKee. I'm a resident of Lee County, and I have an exempt well in the Carrizo Aquifer that continues to be affected by the Vista Ridge project. I am encouraged by the progress of the district that has made a new team of hydrologists, the use of stakeholder groups as advisors, and a sense of renewed purpose that members of the public have witnessed to protect our aquifers. First, I would like to welcome the new board directors and express my gratitude as a citizen landowner. I truly appreciate your willingness to diligently serve on this board. Anyone who is dedicated enough to invest the time and effort required of this appointment to carry out the district's mission, protecting our local water supply and contributing to the achievement of a balance between conservation and production from our aquifers deserves the respect of its constituents. It is a new year with new directors, and I look forward to working with this board to hopefully see one that is dedicated to protecting our groundwater resource, judiciously allowing permits, and thoughtfully appreciating the concerns of their constituents, Bastrop and Lee counties, who are your boots on the ground, are your canaries in the coal mine, depending on how your point of view is. The second part of my address is to thank Lost Pines for establishing a mitigation plan. While there still remains issues that I hope will be worked out in the near future, I continue to be hopeful Lost Pines will work with the advisory committee of well owners and other stakeholders via the general manager. Seeking reimbursement from the district is a daunting, potentially humiliating experience for landowners. I sincerely thank Mr. Totten and Ms. Campy, who worked with several of landowners on my county road to process the reimbursement forms. This beginning has given hope to those who have borne the financial cost from well failures they were not warned about and could not have anticipated for now over 2 years. I also personally appreciate seeing the benefit of a long journey working with our senators, Senator Colkers, and our Representative Giddings, for mitigation legislation. The many times I have spoken to this board expressing the concerns of so many landowners who have experienced well failure and the subsequent financial stress, and now witnessing the mitigation plan finally being implemented. Along with this appreciated benefit, I too have hope that finally we the people will see remediation of our wells that will be sustainable into our future. So believe it or not, I stand here with a grateful spirit to each of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I've got Mr. Andy Weir. Now, Mr. Weir, I wasn't sure whether you had an agenda item or a non-agenda item.
Should I put number 2?
Number 2.
Public comment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it 2A or 2B?
I'm sorry. Yeah, okay.
It doesn't really matter.
It's a non-agenda item.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Andy Weir. I live here in Bastrop County. I have a well in the Simsboro Formation in the Teresa Wilcox. And I'm the executive director for Simsboro Aquifer Water Defense Fund. We work with landowners in Bastrop, Lee, Milam, and Burleson County to help protect groundwater rights, but also to protect the Teresa Wilcox Aquifer. I wanted to offer my congratulations or condolences, whichever you all feel, for being on the board. It's a tough haul. And as Ms. McKee said, we really appreciate all the work that the board has done, and we look forward to working with you all on new projects. I wanted to highlight in the management plan and in the rules, one of the things that we had in the stakeholder committee was that the district's stated goals are to manage the sustainability of the aquifer and to prevent significant sustained drawdown in water levels in the aquifers. And so those are sort of the overarching goals, and those are the things we really appreciate working on with you all. In addition to that, the district sets a desired future condition. And that's done in a collaborative process with 4 other districts: Fayette County Groundwater District, Post Oak, Savannah Groundwater District, Brazos Valley, and Minnie's, Texas. And in that collaborative process, you all set a desired future condition, what you want the aquifer to look like 50 years from now. That's where your stated goals of sustainable management and preventing significant water level drops really come into play. because everything they do in Post Oak and Fayette County, Brazos Valley, and Giddings, Texas, has an impact on our water levels here in Bastrop County. And so I asked the board to take this opportunity. It was supposed to be a GMA 12. This DFC discussion takes place at this meeting called Groundwater Management Area 12. And those are about quarterly and meetings. They were going to have one tomorrow, but it's been postponed. And so that's an opportunity to come up to speed with this desired future condition process and how your stated goals can be incorporated. And then you provide the guidance to the general manager so that when he participates in these meetings, he can put forth Lost Pines Groundwater District's views on sustainability and preventing sustained water loss. And in that, sorry, I lost my notes there, to just emphasize it's an opportunity to provide that guidance to the general manager. He can't make those decisions without you. In reviewing the minutes from various committee meetings, I've noticed that the DFC and the impacts or the guidance to the general manager has not been discussed in the management or governance committees. And so if that could be something that you all begin to put on your calendars and on your radar, because we're in the middle of a 5-year decision process. And now's where the rubber meets the road. They're going to start running computer models. They're going to want to look at what the possible results are, and they're going to apply what we call the 9 considerations. They're going to say, what do these future levels do to property rights? What do these future levels do to the economy, outside and inside the district? Those kind of questions are going to be answered. So if you can provide guidance, direction to the general manager, he can fully engage in that process. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on public comments? Okay, seeing none, we will then move on to the next agenda item. Item 3, the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are routine and will be enacted by one motion. There's no discussion or action on these items unless requested by a board director. I do wish to pull out 3F and G. I do wish to have some discussion on that. So I will pull 3F and 3G out, and I will move them into the regular agenda so that we can have some discussion on them, because we did not receive the materials in time. And so we definitely need to talk about that. So except for 3F and 3G, I'll entertain a motion on the consent agenda. Unless, is there anything else that someone would like to pull out of the consent agenda? Okay.
I would make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exclusion of F and G.
Okay, I heard a second from Director Smith. Hearing that, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. So then we will move on to item 4A. Any announcements?
Yes, I have a couple. I don't know.
Is it on?
Yeah. I don't know how many of you have been following the City of Austin Aquifer Storage Recovery Project. We understand that they have determined the location at the end of December. We've contacted them and they will not tell us where it is. They said it will be announced either February or March. And so we're all kind of waiting, to find out where it's going to be. They said that they would not tell us because we're going to be dealing with their landowners. And this is, of course, for a not to go ahead and start, but to do a pilot project. So, my other announcement is our friend Steve Boggs of Environmental Stewardship. At his 75th birthday this past weekend, he was honored by Senator Colcourse with the resolution and a Texas flag. And I just wanted to congratulate him. He's back in the back.
Is he here? Yes, he
That's all.
I do have an announcement. I'd like to welcome the county judges. I see they're both sitting back there, both Judge Malinak and Judge Klaus. Welcome. Hello, guys.
I'd like to say that the judges from Milam County and Burleson County were both going to be here tonight, but they've got some water issues because of the freeze. So.
Sure. Well, welcome. Thank you for being here. Any other announcements? Okay, then we'll move on. I'd like to, item 4B, I'd like to welcome the new board members, Director Nick Textor, representing Bastrop County, and then we have Director Nancy Phillips Burgess, and Director Deborah Phillips, representing Lee County. So welcome to the 3 new members. Any questions? You've got the great staff and a great general manager and hydrologists and lawyers, lawyer staff. So it's excellent stuff to work with. So look forward to working. Okay. Item 4C, presentation by the district hydrogeologist regarding surface water and groundwater interaction during drought conditions. Dr. Fernandez. Welcome. Everyone should have handouts, should have hard copies in front of them, and
Okay, thank you. My name is Jordan Fernandez. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to move around a little bit as I speak to you. It works better for me. I run LRE Water here in Texas. It's been a pleasure to work with you over the last year, as it's the first time that I actually get to address you on a topic that my expertise meets your needs. So we're going to talk about surface water and groundwater interaction today. I also have a second job as a professor at the University of Texas at Austin. So whenever I give these types of talks, I come off as professorial. I hope that it doesn't insult you that I'm already possibly telling you things you already know. Maybe you'll learn a couple new things too, and you pick it up along the way. So just indulge me in the way that I like to deliver these types of talks. So I'm going to talk to you about groundwater and surface water interaction. The first page, we'll go back to the first page if you would. So here is really what we want to understand. There are 3 basic types of groundwater surface water interaction. In the top picture, you have a river going through the landscape, and you can see the little blue arrows from the aquifer underneath the river. They are going into the river, which means that water is coming from the aquifer and going into the river. That's called a gaining stream, right? The stream flow is going to increase as you go downstream as it flows across the aquifer surface. Gaining streams, we have them a lot. The Colorado River is an example of a gaining stream as it passes through Bastrop County. The middle figure is the example of a losing stream, where water is flowing from the stream and going into the aquifer. And you can see the blue coloring at the bottom of that graphic there. It shows blue being higher at the stream, and as you go away on either side, away from the stream, the water level actually, the blue level decreases. Right, so that means that the stream is higher, has more water and pressure driving that water into the aquifer, pushing it off to the side. It's a losing stream. As the water goes downstream in the river, it's going to have less and less stream flow the more it goes down to the stream. Right, that happens in a lot of different water bodies. It'll happen in Lee and Bastrop counties, especially in the streams that are not perennial. They're streams that are not running all the time. Those streams are much more likely to be losing streams. And then the bottom figure is this really a situation which you don't want, right? This is an absolute disconnection between the river and the underlying water table, the aquifer underneath it. And so in this case, it's a losing stream, and it loses quite a lot usually. All that water goes out of the stream, it percolates through the zone of aeration, which is a portion of the aquifer that's not saturated. It has air and water in it. And that water goes down to the aquifer, the water table, but it's just disconnected from the land surface and the stream, and you can see the coloration on the land is brown, right? It's indicative that this is a situation where you're not likely to get as much vegetation growing along your riverbanks. We don't really have those situations much in Bastrop County, at least not right now. Okay, so groundwater surface water interaction, we're going to talk about a lot of different things. Does groundwater management affect the surface water flow? It could. Does the surface water management affect the aquifer levels? Well, it also could. What is the exchange between the groundwater and surface water sources? Where and when does this exchange occur? It may not be constant everywhere across your domain. It may not be constant in time. Can we quantify this exchange, right? Do we know that the stream is getting 25 CFS over this section of river? And will more or less groundwater pumping affect the surface water flows? These are all the types of questions we try and answer when we address groundwater surface water interaction. If you have any questions as I go, please just interrupt me. It's great. Okay, next. All right, so I'm sure you're already aware of the major and minor aquifers within Bastrop and Lee counties within your jurisdiction. I show them here on the graphic clipped to the boundaries of Lost Pines GCD. You've got a lot of outcrop area in the Carrizo-Wilcox aquifer. You've got the Queen City aquifer, the Sparta aquifer, and the Yawa-Jackson aquifer that all outcrop in your jurisdiction. In areas where you have outcrop, that is at the land surface. That's where the rivers and rainfall and other things are going to interact with your aquifer. That's where you're likely to have the groundwater surface water interaction. Everything that's sort of the hash marked symbols there, those are down dip, which means that that portion of the aquifer is below some sort of other land surface material above it, right? And that other land surface material could interact with your streams, but the down dip aquifer is not likely to interact. All right, go ahead. So in Bastrop and Lee County, I calculated your area of the county in acres and then determined what percentage of that area is actually covered by aquifer outcrop. So it's 75% in Lee County, 68% in Bastrop County. That means that there's a lot of interaction between your surface water streams and your outcrop areas. You're going to have a lot of this interaction in your jurisdiction. Next. Okay, so what surface water features do you have? As a groundwater district, you may not think about this as too much. You're all familiar with the Colorado River running through the center of Bastrop County. That's the major surface water feature in Bastrop County. You also have Lake Bastrop, which is a little hard to see on the graphic. It's right below where I labeled Bastrop County. In Lee County, you have a couple other creeks. Middle Yawa Creek, East Yawa Creek are generally the biggest creeks there. Mostly all of Lee County is going to drain into Lake Somerville. And you can see Lake Somerville sort of on the eastern side of Lee County. In the very bottom southern corner of of Bastrop County is the part of the Guadalupe River Basin, right? So you actually have 3 different river basins in your jurisdiction. The Guadalupe River Basin is in that little corner of your county. You're going to have only a little bit of stream flow in that area. All of those streams are going to probably be intermittent, and the water is just going to flow to the south and into the Guadalupe River Basin. The majority of Bastrop County is within the Colorado River Basin. The majority of Lee County is within the Brazos River Basin. So in between the 2 counties, you have a basin divide, which is a topographic high point, right? And on either side of that divide, your stream flow is going to be small because each location there has a small watershed, right? The bigger your watershed is, the more likely you're going to have more flow coming through it. So right at that divide, you're not going to have very much stream flow. There's not likely to be very much surface water, groundwater interaction in those areas. So right along the county border, you're not likely to get much surface water, groundwater interaction. You can read the statistics that are on the slide. You have 1,200 some odd miles of named streams in your district. You have almost 3,000 miles of unnamed streams. Unnamed streams they might have local names, but they weren't important enough for a national data set to have its name stored in. And those are going to likely be ephemeral streams that are not there all the time. They're only going to have water flowing and possible groundwater interaction after a big storm event. You also have 18,599 small water bodies within your 2 counties, right? And those water bodies are your local stock ponds, they're other vanity ponds, there are all sorts of water bodies that are not regulated generally by anybody. And if you sum up all the area of those ponds, you're talking about 24,000 surface acres. So that's more than twice the surface acreage of Lake Somerville. And you have evaporation and evaporative loss from all of these ponds. So that's quite a lot of water that you could lose every year evaporating from those ponds. But those ponds are also a direct interaction with the underlying aquifer. So you have water just sort of stuck there. It's either going to evaporate, it's going to be used, or it's going to sink into the ground and recharge that aquifer. So they can be good from an aquifer management standpoint. Yes?
Are those black lines indicating the different, are those the divides for the basins?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, on that graphic, the black lines are the basin divides. Yes. Okay, all right. All right, so here's just a little more information on the small water bodies. This is a topic that is becoming more and more important throughout Central Texas. I've been interviewed on KXAN News a couple times about this topic. These are, again, unregulated ponds, and it's hard to see on the graphic, I apologize for that, but in the printout it might be better. I took a picture of the Giddings airport, the area around Giddings, because when I made this slide I thought we were having this meeting in Giddings. But I wanted to show you that just in this one small area, there's over 100 of these small ponds. They're circled in red, right? And these are ponds that were created for probably a variety of reasons, right? But what they do is they will capture, groundwater can be put into them. That all depends on you as a deciding board whether you allow that. But they can also collect surface water. They can also just fill in from normal groundwater flow, depending on how they're constructed. We don't know if those ponds have liners underneath that prevent recharge of the aquifer. We really don't have any information on these ponds at all. And in some of these studies that I've done for other clients, I've estimated that these ponds can reduce the stream flow by 15% over a period of record, right? So they can be significant changes to the hydrology of rainfall runoff patterns and recharge to an aquifer. Okay, next. All right. Here's a very important slide. And the question was posed to be, how does drought affect the aquifers in the Lost Pines district, right? So on the top slide, what I'm showing you is a hydrograph for a monitoring well from the Water Development Board that's located right near State Highway 71 and Texas 95 in Bastrop. It's had continuously recorded water level data from 2003 to the present. It's shown hourly here, and it's shown as the depth from the surface to the water level in the well. All right, so the top of the graphic is 200 feet, the bottom of the graphic is 270 feet, right? That means that if the blue line is closer to the bottom, that water is further down in the well, and the water level has decreased in the well at that time, okay? So what I wanted to point out here is on this graphic, everything that's shaded, the thick vertical lines that are gray, those are the summer months. That's May through October, right? And every time you see the water levels in this well going down, it happens generally in the May through October months, right? That's logical. We all know we use more water in the summertime because it's hotter. The bottom graph shows the U.S. Drought Monitor for Bastrop County. Same time period, same exact axis. And if you look at the 2011 to 2012 period on the bottom graph, you see it's all black. That means that was an exceptional drought year, right? It was the whole year, that whole summer was an exceptional drought, really, really hot. Look what happened to the water level in that well at that same time. It went down, and it went down drastically to the lowest level that it was recorded. Why did it go down? It's not because water is being evaporatively lost from this well or from the aquifer. We're talking about 200 and some odd feet down below the surface. The water went down in this well, I would argue, and I don't have proof of this because I can't verify it, but I would argue just because people are pumping more around it. They're using more water because they're feeling the drought, they're feeling the hot, they're feeling the need for the water. So that's what you exactly see. The water level goes down during drought periods because people are using more of the water. And this is for the Carrizo aquifer. It's again a fairly deep aquifer in this location. It is still the outcrop. So it's possible that you could lose water to evaporation, but again, from 200 feet down, you're not likely to do that. Any questions on that? Yes.
Would it also include less recharge?
Not really. I mean, the recharge is going to be it's going to be lower in 2011 in a hot drought, right?
Right.
But the recharge to get to this water level, it takes a long time, right? So the reduced recharge that we would see in 2011 wouldn't show up in the well until much later. Yes?
Are you surprised that the drought of 22 and 23 didn't create as severe a result as the 2011? Because I was thinking 22 was pretty bad.
Well, it's interesting though, you don't see as much black, right, in 22, 23. It was still hot, but it wasn't as evaporatively hot that we just had the panic that we had in 2011. I was surprised at it, actually. Any other questions? Okay. Okay, so we talked already about the interaction theory. Let's just hit the advanced one, if you would. All right, so the Colorado River, under normal conditions, it's going to be the gaining stream. Right? It is gaining as it goes downstream. The state's water availability models, the surface water availability models, that is, they do not assume that it's a gaining stream. They also don't assume that it's a losing stream. They model the Colorado River as if the water that's in it is going to stay there unless somebody takes it out for use. It's not going to be evaporatively lost. It's not going to sink into the aquifer. In reality, we see it in most times, it is a gaining stream. And perennial streams in your district are likely to be gaining streams. Under high flow conditions, right, so when there's a lot of water coming out of Lake Lady Bird, that high pulse in the Colorado River is going to drive water from the river into the aquifer, right? And I have proof of that. I'll show it to you in just a little bit. But these are not very long in duration pulses. Not very much water goes into the alluvial aquifer system. And as soon as that pulse goes by, that water generally comes back out into the stream. So it's not that the water from the river is really recharging the aquifer. It does it temporarily, and then that loses that recharged water. Go ahead. Yep, like I said, conditions to be avoided. You want to avoid the bottom disconnect there. So go ahead.
Oh, I have a question.
Yes.
The model that you're referring to, is that the WAM?
No.
Which one are
Well,
you,
yes, it
which
is.
one
It
are
is-
you
it is the
talking
WAM,
about?
yes.
Okay,
The state's surface water availability model is the WAM.
okay,
Water availability model. It's how TCQ regulates surface water rights
Okay.
across Texas and the basin.
and so that, you're saying that doesn't consider gaining or losing?
Well, it has the ability to do so.
Okay.
But when they created that model, they assumed, well, they couldn't decide whether the model should be losing or gaining in everything from Lake Lady Bird all the way down to Matagorda Bay. So they just assigned it as a zero loss.
Thank you.
Yes.
This may be a little bit off topic, but since you're here, would you mind commenting on the effect of the increased surface lining of sand and gravel all along the Colorado River in Bastrop County, and how it might be affecting the water table in some of these items?
So I gotta admit, I'm not an expert on mining and water use. I know they do use a lot of water for dust suppression. They also, when you're right next to the river, and they're dewatering, right? So to dewater it, the water has to come into the pits that they're making, and so they have to pump it out. That is groundwater that's coming into their pits. And that's just locally flowing available groundwater. So it's essentially these mines that when they're dewatering, they're filling up with groundwater and then they're pushing it and discharging it, I assume, back into the river. And that would be augmenting stream flow with groundwater. Right.
That would not be considered waste of groundwater, dumping it to the river?
It could, if that was your board's decision. You could argue that it's augmenting surface water, which could be beneficial to surface water users, but is that your job? No, it's not.
Gravel pits in Bastrop County? I don't know. I know they're on Travis.
Yeah,
Take a ride down 969 and then go over to Smithville.
Yeah, it's just that there have been several TCEQ permit requests to put treated wastewater just north of Bastrop.
okay. Can we do?
Sure.
Yes, Steve.
Is some of that water in the mining when they're close to the river, not alluvial water?
Well, it's going to be water from the alluvial system, the aquifer system. It's not likely to be coming from the river and pushing through the alluvium into the mine pit.
Okay.
So I pose the question, can excessive pumping turn a gaining stream into a losing stream? And so on the top graphic, I drew a well, the vertical black line, I call it a pumping well. Next event. All right, and so pumping from that well is going to induce a cone of depression around the well. right? And if that cone of depression is strong enough, it could actually lower the water table right up to the river and cause, in that sort of section, some water from the river to flow into the aquifer system and then go into the well. So it's possible, if you had enough pumping wells along this stretch of river and close enough to it, and if all the aquifer properties are right and the wells were pumped all the time, you could definitely change a gaining stream into a losing stream. There's no doubt about it. There's places I can point to in the Brazos River Basin where this happened. So it's possible. It's hard to do. It takes a lot, and I'll show more on the Brazos River Basin results at the end of the
What's
presentation.
the depth of that well that you're?
Oh, this is a schematic drawing, so there's no real depth associated with it.
Would the depth vary that on how it's gaining or losing?
Sure, I mean, if that pumping well was deep enough to go into an aquifer system below the river system, where that below aquifer wasn't attached to the aquifer system, then the pumping wouldn't have any effect on the river at all. If it was just pumping from, say, on the order of 50 to 100 feet, depending on the thickness of this unconfined layer, that was where you would get the impact on the stream. Okay.
As an independent lot,
Sorry, what?
this may be totally different from what we're discussing here, but the proposal that has been made to take treated wastewater and insert it into the aquifer, how does that work or affect what we're talking about, stream flow or the natural ability for it to, is that a good or bad thing?
Well,
How does that work?
so anytime you're injecting water into a system, let's go back to that cone of depression there. So just hit advance a couple. One more. There we go. So you see the cone of depression. If you're pulling water out of the system, you're going to get a downward cone. If you're injecting water in that well, you can imagine that red line flipped up vertically, right? So you're going to get a mound of water mounding up around that well, and it's going to get lower and off to the side, and it's going to drive that water outward away from the well, and it's going to ultimately raise the water level around that well. If you did that enough, that would raise the water table. It could change a losing stream into a gaining stream. It's possible. That can be a good thing. It can be a bad thing. Aquifers, material generally also filter and clean the water flowing through it. That can be a good thing too. That's why I love hydrogeology, right? The answer is yes or no all the time.
Dirty surface water going into the ground is not a good thing.
It is definitely not a good thing, and that's one of the biggest concerns about injecting surface water into groundwater systems in the Austin ASR as well, is making sure that the chemistry of the two different waters match and are not going to create precipitate that becomes harmful.
The track record is not too good.
That is definitely true. Yeah. And not to plug our work in other states, but we do this quite a lot, ASR projects out of our Arizona office, and about 75% of the effort that we put into those projects is on understanding the chemistry of the two source waters that are going to be mingled. And I don't think people put enough focus on that here. Yes, well.
What is your opinion on, they say, before I became county judge, Austin came down and they were committed for it. They said, well, if they pump 100,000 gallons into the ground, they're not gonna bring out the 50,000. Half of it. Is even half the water gonna be there?
Yeah. In most cases.
A bigger percent of it's gonna go away, and it's gonna go get spread out into the aquifer.
It'll spread out, right? But it's filling up other space that's already there.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. You're using the available storage, you're filling that up. How much they can recover is a factor of their pumping regime and where they're putting the wells that they're going to pull the water back up in. It's not necessarily just a function of what is recoverable around it. So yeah, I think their claim of putting in 100 and pulling out 50 is certainly reasonable. I think they should be able to get more than that, actually, if they plan it right.
I don't prove it good. Ask that question.
Yep.
So one of our big problems with that particular situation is they don't have full control of all the chemicals and stuff that are gonna be in that water that they're gonna put down into our pristine aquifer, chlorine, fluoride, heavy metals, anything that you get in a sewer system that comes out of a large city is going to end up in that treated water that's going to go down into that aquifer. And once that aquifer is contaminated, it's contaminated.
It's a legitimate concern, I'm not making light of it. My other point to that is you can have companies like Samsung who need ultra pure water, and they take that surface water that they get from whatever source they get, or even groundwater, and they treat it to the conditions that they need. So the treatment processes are in existence, they can be implemented, it's just they have to be forced to be implemented in these ASR situations to make sure that these interactions don't happen. And sometimes if you over-treat a wastewater and then inject it, that over-treatment, the water's too pure, it's going to cause more reaction. So again, the batch study of combining the surface water or the excess water source for ASR and the in situ groundwater, the water that's in the aquifer that you're injecting into, doing that combination study, as well as doing that study with samples of the aquifer matrix, the rock and other formations there, because they're interacting with the water when it's in place as well. So there's really the three components that really need to be studied to make sure that this process is not going to be detrimental. Okay, go ahead. Okay, so I wanted to talk to you about a groundwater surface water interaction study that was this report was done by the Water Development Board and these other players, LCRA and Brazos River Authority, Post Oak, Savannah. They published this in July of 2021, okay? And this was a study in Bastrop County, in your jurisdiction. All right. What I show on that graphic is their map. Oh, go ahead, right there. You can sort of see it says study site number 2, PB-Vista facility. This is Pace Bend Park. LCRA's got a facility there, so they put a sampling site there. And you go ahead to the next one. What they did, here's the river to the top. This is the Colorado River. They put in a probe in the river that measures water height. Above the probe, it also does electrical conductivity and temperature of the river water. Then they had 3 monitoring wells in the alluvial system right adjacent to the river. Well 1 was only about 50 feet away from the river. Well 2 was, I think, 120 feet. And then well 3 was 240 feet away. So they got progressively further away. And they screened all of those wells to reflect conditions only in a sand and gravel alluvial aquifer that they saw and observed when they did the drilling. And they studied it. They put transducers in, and they presented results for about 285 days here before this report. And then they said, we're going to keep this data and the loggers in place for 5 years. All the data gets automatically uploaded to the internet and somebody can access it. Now, I don't know how you can access it. I tried, I couldn't find it. So all I can do is report is what's in this document. But I think you'll find it pretty interesting. Let's go to the next slide. So this was their schematic graphic right out of their document. So you can see figure 4, that's referencing figure 4 from their document. You've got the Colorado River on the left. The vertical scale is accurate for the topography of the area that you're going in. You can see that on the very bottom of the aquifer system is a silt and clay layer. Above that is a sand and gravel layer. That is where water is likely to flow. Sand and gravel always going to have greater aquifer flow through it. That's where they screened each of the 3 monitoring wells. Above that, you have another silt and clay layer that makes the hill and up to the ground surface. What they found when they did the 3 observation wells is that they are all under artesian pressure, which means that the water level in those wells actually exceeded, by only a little bit, but did exceed the water level in the Colorado River. So what does that mean? That means that there is enough pressure in the aquifer system to keep that water slightly higher than the water in the aquifer. This is a gaining stream, right? Water is always going to move from higher pressure to lower pressure. And that's what we're seeing here. Okay, next slide. So, as I said, they recorded temperature, electrical conductivity, and water level. And so they wanted to see if they could make a connection between river temperature and the temperature measured in the 3 wells. On this graphic, they show the time, so May of 2020 through February of 2021. The blue line, that's all kinds of squiggles, that's the temperature in the river, right? So you can see it got high in the summer, and this is all in Celsius. And then it got fairly cold in the February timeframe. And it fluctuated quite a lot. The other lines, the yellow and sort of beige and hard to see greener ones, those are the temperatures recorded in the wells. Hardly any variation, certainly no variation compared to the river. That's an indication that water was not coming from the river and going to those wells because they just didn't have the same temperature, or that you didn't see the same temperature fluctuation. Right? That's the conclusion you make. There's no connection there between the river and the well temperature. Okay, next. Now, I had a question about this when I looked at this report. And if you look closely at the temperature in the wells, and I show the three temperatures there, well number 3, which was furthest away from the river, showed just a constant temperature almost the whole time. Right? It's the one that's almost a horizontal line. Then you've got well 2 and well 1 that actually got warmer as you went into February. Anybody explain to me how that can happen? Right? I mean, what's the heat source that's causing this water to get warmer in these wells? I don't know. Right? So that was a question. It was a red flag that I had.
When your ground layer is lower, can the heat dissipate from the sun down into the ground? You had a whole lot less dirt on top of the sand layer. In your
Possible.
picture.
Yeah, actually, that's not a bad explanation. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. All right, let's go to the next slide. So here's the second thing that they want to study was conductivity, right? Is there an electrical conductivity signature that you can see in the river that also gets conducted into the wells? And again, the blue line is the river. The conductivity values fluctuated heavily with river flow. The conductivity values in the well side did not, right? They were fairly constant throughout the period of record. I thought it was interesting that point 1, that's closest to the river, had the highest conductance, right? So it was much higher than the river itself. Point 2 had the lowest conductance of the 3 wells, so that was the middle well in between. And then point 3, which was further away from the river, was slightly higher in conductance. I couldn't figure out why that would be either, right? So couple that with the strange temperature signatures I had, it just, again, raised some questions, right? In thinking about it, it made me wonder what's going on. Is there something else that wasn't accounted for? And again, I don't have proof of this. I'm wondering if there's a septic discharge near this location. Because that could have affected the temperature, that also could have affected the conductivity. There are also other possibilities. Yes, Steve?
Is it possible that the change in conductivity of the well that's farthest away had more connection to the underlying aquifer than the other 2?
Yeah.
And, I mean, the only thing about this study that I have a major concern about is that they did not have a well that was, and they did not, that was into an underlying aquifer, and they didn't have an aquifer that was in connection with the alluvial aquifer. So we didn't have that third leg in the chair of the stool showing us what the interaction is between the actual major aquifer or mine aquifer in some cases and the alluvium. And this should have had they tried to get the Hooper, but the Hooper is like 80 feet below all of this, as I understood it.
Right, so just for the clarification purpose of what Steve was saying, he would have liked to see, and I agree with this, the idea of having a 4th well that went through the entire alluvial system, through that bottom silt and gravel layer, and got into the Hooper formation of the Syndro, and that's all part of the Carrizo, right? It's there, it's underneath the system. They just, for whatever reason, decided not to drill it. Most likely it was with cash money associated with it. But it would have provided useful information, and it could have affected these electrical conductivity and temperature results. It could. We don't know. We don't have that information from this study.
Wouldn't the connection somehow with the underlying aquifer be what provided the artesian pressure? How did the alluvium have an artesian pressure, those 3 wells, if they were not somehow connected to one of the deeper aquifers in some way, maybe from a longer distance.
Yeah,
From that location.
I tend to think it's more the lateral pressure of the alluvial system contributing to the higher flows, or the higher pressures right near the water surface. I don't think I mean, it is possible that it could come from below, but I think it's also more possible that it's from the lateral. Alan, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering how precipitation events correlate with some of this.
That comes next. Any other questions? Okay, so the next one. All right, so the other thing, of course, that they measure is water level fluctuation, right? And we know the Colorado River fluctuates wildly when they release for hydropower, which they do during the summer, right? And you can see the peaking, the daily releases and then pulse flows that go downstream. So again, the blue is the water level from the river, and then you've got the other colors that are the water levels from the wells. If you look all the way here on the right, which is September 12th or so, 2020, you can see clearly that the river is lower, and the wells, as you get from the river to the closest well, that's the next yellow line, and then the one above it, 120. So they're further away, they're higher in elevation. So water is obviously higher in the aquifer there and goes lower into the river. Now, there are a couple periods of high flow pulses where that changed. The river got high enough, so it was actually higher in elevation than the water in those wells, and it was driving water from the river into the aquifer system. Okay, not doing it for very long, because you can see that one peak that's high there. The next day, as the trough goes down, at the bottom of that trough, the blue line is now at the bottom again. Right, so within the course of a day, some water may have gone into the aquifer, but then the water would have come right back out. And that's what you saw constantly throughout this process. A lot of those daily peaks weren't strong enough, they weren't high enough to drive water into the aquifer system, but some of them were. That other one that says hydropower pulses, that one there, the blue line is getting a little bit higher. Right, so it goes to show that you can have times where this stream in this location, Colorado River, is going to be a losing stream. But most of the time it's gaining. Next. So that was a summer event. Here's the same thing in winter. It really just shows you the same thing. Makes it a little easier to see because you don't have too many of the pulses. You did have some pulsing in February for some reason. They had another high flow event, did the same thing, drove water from the river system into the aquifer. And then you can see later in March time frame how clearly the water levels in the aquifer were higher and driving water into the stream. So, next. Last thing the authors of the report wanted people to know was they could clearly see a fairly consistent time lag from when you get the peak in the river flow to the peak in the well elevation, between 1.5 and 2.5 hours, roughly. And that was fairly consistent that they saw through their original data set. So what this is telling them is the water is really providing additional pressure to drive changes in water levels in the aquifer. Right? And so it was pushing in, pulling out at different times. Go ahead. Okay, so the conclusions that they got from that whole study. They did some things called a slug test in their wells to come up with the conductivity of the aquifer, of the alluvial system. They came up with a hydraulic conductivity of just under 5 feet per day. Now, I know that number probably doesn't mean anything to you. It is low compared to the conductivity numbers that other studies have come up with in the past, and low compared to the value that's being used in the groundwater availability model for this area, right? What are the implications of that being low? Well, the implications are that it's not really providing, the aquifer there is not providing very much water to the river system. In fact, I calculated it from data in the report. It was equivalent to 0.05 CFS, cubic feet per second, 0.05. Compare that to the 315 CFS was in the river today, right? It's meaningless. It's not there. So I question that, but I don't have any reason to question the results of their slug test, because generally slug tests are easy to interpret, and they were consistent with their results and what they presented. Why is this a different value than other studies? I don't know. There's more stuff that can be investigated, for sure. So, again, these loggers are supposed to stay in place for quite a long time. They also did not address if there was any impact on the study from other pumping that might have been going on close to these wells, right? All of these blue squares are district-known wells They're in your database that I got out there today. The green squares are the subject wells for this study. So there are wells around it that could be pumping and could have some effect on the aquifer. We don't know, they didn't address that in the report. Hopefully they're coming out with a phase 2 of this report, and then it'll have the 5 years of data and tell us more interesting things. I don't know. I also kind of question, this was a report that was done by the Water Development Board and the LCRA, and Brazos River Authority contributed some money to it. Post Oak Savannah contributed some money to it. Not to criticize you as a board, I would think that Lost Pines would want to contribute to it, or something, right? Just because it's in your district, it's would have been good to know about. Again, I wasn't here, I don't know anything about how this got started. I do know that the players involved in this study were lobbying the water board for years to get funding for it. So this was, it was published in 21, I think they started in 19. They probably started trying to get this thing going in 2017. So it's a long time coming to get to this stage. Next, I'm almost done, I promise. I wanted to tell you about the Brazos River alluvial study. So the Brazos River, of course, is just the river basin to the east. They have a Brazos River alluvial aquifer that's a defined minor aquifer for Texas. It covers all from, say, Waco down to the coast. There's a lot of wells. I think there was 18,000 wells or so in the alluvial system right adjacent to the Brazos River. Next slide, advance. There's also a lot of pumping that is attributed to this alluvial aquifer, and the Water Development Board studies this. I think they came up with over 155,000 acre feet a year in 2011, and that continued all the way through 2017, 2018. So, and you can see how it really ramped up after the year 2000. It started pumping more and more out of this alluvial system. Next. The purpose of this study, they hired me to come up and mathematically figure out, okay, given all of this pumping and given where the wells are located and what the conductivity is and all this, what's the impact on Brazos River stream flow resulting from all of this groundwater alluvial pumping? And I used an equation called Glover-Balmer. It's a relatively simplistic equation, but it is a published equation used for this purpose, assessing stream flow loss due to groundwater pumping. And here I was able to calculate, depending on how they did the pumping, if it was all for irrigation, where they irrigated half the year, so they pumped really hard for half the year and then stopped for half a year. That had less of an immediate impact than if they just pumped constantly at a lower rate. Right? So the two red lines on that graph show the decrease in stream flow resulting from all that pumping. And over time, it was projected to be about 200 CFS that would have been lost from the Brazos River from all of this alluvial pumping. That doesn't mean that all of these wells are actually sucking water out of the river. What it means is that those wells are reducing the flux of groundwater into the Brazos River. That's how the losses occur. Next. So stream flow can reduce alluvial pumping. It did it, and we can show it dramatically here in Brazos River.
Is the Brazos River gaining or?
It's a gaining stream. Okay. Yeah, very much so. Next slide. That's it. So, thank you for listening to me. I hope I gave you some useful information.
So by aquifer flux, you mean aquifer flow?
Yes, flux flow through porous media. Yes. Yes.
On the map where you got all the little ponds outlined in red, and you said those were using groundwater, and you said that was groundwater instead of rainwater, that it would reduce stream flow.
Yes.
And I believe you said that it's up to us, and we allow them to use groundwater for that. Are you aware of any other groundwater districts that have limitations on using groundwater to fill a stock tank?
Yeah.
We'd like to be, but don't know if we can get away with it.
Telling a Texan they can't feed their pet livestock, I think that'd be hard, right? But
Within limits.
within limits,
Not to
absolutely.
prohibit it, but to say you can't use, so that you can't use 5 acre feet to create a pond.
The biggest problem and I don't want to get off topic here, but the biggest problem with these small ponds is the law for Texas says if you own property, you can put a pond on your property that is less than 200 acre-feet of storage. And if you do that, you don't need a permit. Right? And that was written irrespective of the size of your lot. Right? And that was when people were buying ranches that had tens of thousands of acres. Now those ranches are being cut up into ranchettes, and everybody wants their own pond. And so you build a pond, and it captures that stream flow, and it reduces the stream flow in the Colorado River quite effectively. Right? And state water planners didn't think about that when they made that law. And why would they? It's an unintended consequence, but it is something that we can measure and show now. Anyone else?
Any other questions?
I mean, well, the reverse with those little ponds, aren't they helping act as aquifers?
They can be, yeah. It's very possible that ponds, if they're not lined, right, if they're built without clay liners, which I would imagine most of them are, clay liners are rather expensive, then it is possible that that water that is captured, stormwater captured by that impoundment, sitting there on the ground, some of it's going to be lost to evaporation, some of it's going to seep into the ground, and it can certainly help recharge that. And in fact, if you've got stormwater detention ponds next to your houses and condos or multifamily units, they're built to receive the flowing stormwater, capture it, and let it soak into the ground, right? Specifically for that purpose. So there is a benefit to aquifers for these ponds to exist. It's a detractor of the stream flow.
But that loss to evaporation is many, many times what the recharge would be.
I would think so, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Come again.
I have a question for Natasha. I forgot to address in item 4B, the scheduling of the orientation meeting that can I go back to that?
You can go back to that, yes.
So I apologize. In item 4B, in welcoming the new members of the board, we had talked about scheduling district director orientation on a Saturday. Just for all the board and for the public, we would announce it, have a public meeting. We were thinking of maybe like a Saturday afternoon to have an orientation and in terms of legal orientation, and then a little bit on science. So what I'd like for the board is to check your calendars for some Saturday towards the end of January or early February, and if you can speak to the staff in terms of your schedule, and then the staff will try to coordinate a time where we can all meet.
Location?
Don't know. But it'll probably be one of our normal locations, I would hope. Yeah, so.
It's open to the public?
Yes. Yes, it'll be open to the public.
So office is not free for them?
Right. Right, so it'll probably be, like this location or other Giddings location.
May I suggest that they do the scheduling, that staff uses a doodle poll?
Excuse me?
It's called a doodle poll.
Doodle poll?
Right.
Okay.
If you gotta schedule lots of people, it is so much simpler.
But that just doesn't make.
Okay. We'll Google that.
Okay. Doodle poll.
Just have all the days and times you're available.
Sure.
It's a
Thank you.
survey, so.
All right, so we'll work with staff to get that scheduled.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Check.
So let's go and hit the consent agenda items that were pulled out. So the item 3F is a discussion, consideration, and possible action on proposed contract for IT services. Mr. Totten, we just received, you have a hard copy, everyone does, of the services contract. Last month, there was a motion made to have the general manager negotiate a one-year contract. And so this is the one-year contract. So, Mr. Totten, any further information you'd like to pass along on this?
Yes, sir. Mr. President, members of the board, what you have in front of you is a 17-page document. Of those 17 pages, the only ones that are actually relevant to this matter are the first 8 pages, which are the proposal for the managed IT services. In my time working with Stratmont, they've pitched a couple of other projects for our consideration. They included those in this contract, but they're not what we're actually going to be evaluating. So what we're looking at is those first 8 pages, which is the managed IT services. Again, we discussed the cost in our December meeting. You as a board instructed me to come back with that framework from Stratmont, so that's what we have here. So what I'd like this evening is permission to go ahead and execute the contract to get the hardware installed at the offices and get all the back-end infrastructure up and running. That'll include new email addresses for all the board members, along with cybersecurity for the office. So it's a comprehensive package that we looked at last month. It's reflected in the first 8 pages of the agreement that's before you. Now, just looking for your permission to go ahead and execute that so we can move forward on it.
And the costs are still the same, correct?
Yes, sir.
From last month?
Jim, do you know if they would install this, how quickly?
Every time I've spoken with them, they've sounded like they were ready to go. So I would like to think we could have the equipment in by the end of the month.
That's great.
Yes, sir. And that'll be the last hurdle before we do the AV system and everything else for the office. So
I believe that we accept and go forward with the managed IT services contract.
Here, I heard a motion to move forward with the managed IC services contract. Do we hear a second?
Second.
Second by Director Rogers. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Item 3G, discussion, consideration, and possible action on proposed amendment to the LRE Water existing hydrogeology services contract to provide well monitoring services. So you have in front of you a hard copy of the amended service contract. Also, Natasha, if you can speak to the changes, I believe they're mostly regarding just adding well monitoring services and a couple of things associated with that.
Right, and tonight I would ask for authorization for Jim to finalize it, subject to, because this ran pretty quickly. I'd like LRE to look at the changes in full.
Yeah, this is our proposed language.
This is our proposed
Right,
language,
so it needs
right.
to be, it has to go to LRE for
Correct.
their approval.
And so the primary change is to amend the scope of work to allow LRE to come in and sample wells and report on the well sampling, and to do that at least twice a year. So there'd be 2 10-day sampling events. And so Exhibit A lays out what those sampling events would look like with the associated cost. There's a lot of other red line changes, and I could talk about those, but the primary change where you're going to see a lot of red is that if you recall in 2022, our hydrogeology services contract was with ARS. And so ARS assigned the contract to LRE. And so most of the changes contained in here reflect that assignment. And the other change, this was a recommendation from our insurance lawyer, would be to add a policy coverage for them to have automobile liability, and for them to add us as an additional insured for their automobile coverage, because they're going to be traveling now on our behalf. They've already provided their insurance coverage in an earlier demonstration to the district, and so we tracked what they already have. Those are the changes. And I would just ask for y'all to delegate to Jim Totten authority to finalize, subject to LRE's review.
Mr. Fernandez.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify for the new board members, ARS originally submitted the proposal for providing these hydrogeologic services. LRE was a team member there. About a month later, LRE acquired ARS as a company. So we're now the same group, just a larger company under the LRE name.
And that's why we need to update
Yes.
to show reflect the new name.
Right. All the service providers are the same.
These services are looking at all the wells or just the
Just the monitoring
monitoring wells?
wells. We have certain select monitoring wells, and it's just for those select monitoring wells. I guess we call those the DFC monitoring wells.
Or compliance wells, yes,
Yeah,
sir.
important compliance wells, I call them DFC wells.
So is there 60 wells twice? Is there
I
60
think
wells, or
we're
is it-
more than 60 at this point, right?
It says 120, so I was
think we're-
assuming that was
yeah.
divided by 2.
No, ma'am, so Alan's recommended removing some of our previous wells, and he's recommended adding some new ones. We kind of bid this out, assuming that we'd be at the full 120. The first round, obviously we haven't added the wells that Alan recommended last fall, so the first round will be less than that, but we're hoping within the year we'll be close to that 120 mark then. So
And those will be monitored how often?
twice a year to start with.
Twice a year.
As LRE gets more familiar with the process and we get more efficient, hopefully, the cost should come down. Going from 10 days to 4 days, or and then at that point we may look at doing 3 times a year or 4 times a year as they get more efficient, familiar with that route.
Do you anticipate that we're going to use either Bastrop or Lee County easements for any of these wells?
Not at this point, no, ma'am.
The information from this monitoring feeds into
Our database, we have a database, and so we'll be keeping this information in our database.
for what purpose, I guess, is there?
How
do you use this?
What do we use that data for? This is to determine the desired future condition and how are we approaching that desired future drawdown, to monitor our wells to see the status of our aquifers and how they're doing, if they're going down too quickly or if they're going down at all. Right now, our levels in our aquifer have been pretty steady. So it's to keep an eye on the aquifers and see the health of those aquifers.
Are there things in place that say that if these conditions get worse or whatever, that the state is used to make some changes in rules?
Yeah, that would be part in our rules, correct. Right, as part of our rules, we would use this data to be able to curtail, permits,
Permits and pumping.
and pumping, and if that time, if and when that time comes, yeah. So that's the kind of data that we need to have so that we can justify any type of making those decisions.
But also, the DOCs are an average across the whole district, because personally, some areas have been really drastically dropped down.
Fix
But
and
when you
change
look across the
again.
whole,
It's fix and change
Yeah.
again.
right.
Yeah, exactly. So all these wells have to be averaged out by aquifer. And then, so that's why you need a good sampling to cover all the aquifers and cover all the geographies. And our hydrologist last month gave us an outline, a report of where we should have these additional wells. So here, in the long run, at the end of the year, we hope to have up to about 120 monitoring wells.
So this serves a real.
Absolutely, and we were doing Mr. Totten was doing this in-house, providing the service, but we felt that to be more efficient and Mr. Totten is being, stretched quite thin. So the discussion was to have this in the contract for LRE to allow us to have them provide that service for us. But historically, we've done this internally within the district.
Jim, where does the Colorado alluvial monitoring come in? That's not DFC, but
Right. That's Alan's still working on that one, but
it is, okay.
Yeah, but right now we're focused on the DFC compliance, so it hadn't been dropped, but we.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the amendment to the LRE contract to add well monitoring services? Any other questions?
I'd like to make a motion to give General Manager Totten the authority to work on the monitoring.
To finalize?
LRA.
Okay, so the motion is made to allow, or to authorize.
Authorize him to
to
finalize
authorize,
and execute. To finalize it and execute.
Finalize and, so
Yes.
to authorize the general manager to finalize and execute the amendment to the LRE contract.
Yes.
That was the motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Director Cook. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I've got a question. Mr. Phillips has a question.
Okay.
Paragraph 24. Place name. Why are we keeping the contract enforcement in Smithville?
I'm trying to track you. You're in, I see that the applicable law is Bastrop County. Does it say Smithville?
Paragraph 24, venue.
It's page 10.
Page 10, okay.
Okay, got it.
Page 9.
Okay. So, yeah, we can correct that to the current, to the new offices. Yes, in Giddings.
Okay.
We really don't need the city,
In
but
Smithville,
yeah,
Texas.
it's fine. I'll,
Then it goes on to say that about.
right,
All right, so we need to make that one change.
yes.
In paragraph, on page, well, I guess some folks have it on page 9, others have it on page 10. So, again, I guess do we need to vote on it? Because I did not, I guess we'll just do the vote over.
Yes.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, hearing none, then the motion passes. Okay, so back to the regular agenda. We are on item 4, item 4D. Discussion, consideration, possible action on policy delegating negotiation and approval authority to the general manager for district monitoring well agreements. So just to put a little context here, we have 4 permits where in the permit, the permittee has been asked to provide monitoring wells. That's a gatehouse permit, the LCRA permit, the Thomas Turfgrass permit, and the Aqua permit. All in their permits, they all provide for monitoring wells. And so this item, in this agenda item, is to allow the general manager to finalize and negotiate those well monitoring agreements that are part of those permits.
That's right.
Right, because these are monitoring wells that were part of a permit application. So these are separate. This is a separate monitoring well from the other ones that we just discussed. Then the other 120. They do. The permittee pays for that, and then they sign it over to us in most cases, or all cases.
They're always
Okay,
conveyed.
in all
Right.
cases, the permittee pays to create the well, and then they sign it over to us.
Right.
So this is an addition to those 120 that we had just discussed. Mr. Selecki.
That's correct, Mr. Hernandez. I just wanted to come up and present the item, but pretty much nailed all of it. So I appreciate that. I want to introduce myself to the directors. My name is Bobby Salehi. I'm an attorney at Gray, still working here in the movie, working with Natasha Martin. Prior to joining the firm, I spent 5 years at TCQ in the environmental law division, handling water quality, water rights, and water districts matters. But as Mr. Hernandez said, this resolution delegates authority to the general manager to enter into those, negotiate and enter into those well monitoring agreements with permittees. That being said, we can entertain a motion to approve the resolution as drafted.
there any questions on this item? Does everyone understand the distinction and everyone's, okay?
Mr. President, if I may make one clarification. The number of monitored wells is a decision that the board makes. These monitoring agreements are the nuts and bolts of where they'll be located, where they'll be constructed. It's not about, you as a board will determine, what the appropriate number of wells is with each permit holder, but all these agreements are the nuts and bolts of the locations, the construction standards, and all of that. So once you as a board have established what's appropriate for a permit, all that this is doing is authorizing me to nail down the locations, the construction standards, and the kind of the nitpicky details of where those wells will be located. So just so everyone understands what's actually in the agreement. It's not the number of wells or anything else. It's just where they're located, where they're completed, and the legal wranglings of how they're conveyed to the district.
And Mr. Totten, I had thoughts on, I'll skip that, it just escaped my mind. Any questions? I just wanted that you work with our hydrologists and the permittee and their hydrologists, right? So you're not just doing this alone, you're doing this in the context of working with the hydrologist to pick up good locations, et cetera, right?
Yes. And then you work with our lawyers to get it drafted up.
Yes.
Right. We're working on 4 right now.
I know that's right.
Yeah.
Right. Any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we empower the general manager, working with our consultants to negotiate the details on the monitoring of the
Okay.
And approve the policy as presented.
To approve, yeah, because there is a resolution.
There's a resolution in the packet.
Resolution, so we're adopting that resolution. So the motion is to adopt the resolution.
Right.
And I hear a second from Director Seman. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. All right, item 4E, we have discussion and consideration of and possible action on the sale of the district's property located in Page, Texas. So with this, I'd like to do we need to go into executive? Yes, we do need, because of the nature of the business, we'll need to go into executive session. So it is now 7:34, and we will take a break here, and we'll go into executive session at 7:34. So this is executive session, item 5A, executive session of the board pursuant to Texas Government Code sections 551.072 and 551.071, or any closed session permitted by law, to consult with its attorneys and seek advice on real property matters under item 4E above. So with that, we will break for the executive session.
I don't
Did you get that doodle?
Yes.
DOO?